Hello and welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You may have noticed that I've been gone, and I have been, but I was busy working on the Paralympics and the Olympics, and even got the chance to go to Paris. But more about that later. I had a brilliant time, but I'm really excited to bring back the podcast. I have loads of athletes and coaches lined up, and I'm looking forward to get stuck in over the months ahead. I'm Orla Keeling, and what I want to do is to go beyond the highlights and the big days to find out what it really takes to make it to the top of your game. I'm going to talk to people about their passion, their challenges, and the mindset that drives success. Okay, delighted to be joined by a man that I've admired for a long time and haven't worked with yet, just putting the ball out there, Mr. Sami Dowling. Sami, thank you for joining me.
Orla, thank you very much for having me.
Before we get into it, I like to give my guests a chance to give their 30-second elevator pitch, so would you mind winning over the listeners very early on?
I'll give you, would you just talk about what it is that I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I am a strength conditioning coach. I am currently working in the sports surgery clinic in Santry as an SSC coach in the sports medicine department. Outside of that, I do the strength conditioning with the Dublin Ladies senior football team. I suppose over the last, it's 15 years now, I've been coaching as a strength conditioning coach across a few different inter-county teams. I've also worked in pro sport. I suppose that's it in a nutshell.
Very good. What was your start, or why did you get into the whole coaching space?
I got into it quite early on. I think I just really enjoyed training. I played rugby as a kid in school, took up athletics to improve my speed for rugby. Started lifting very early on. I think I was maybe 14 or 15 when I got my first free weight set. And the players around me, I suppose, noticed an improvement in my speed and maybe associated that with the strength improvements I got. And I used to get a lot of advice, or it's not advice, I used to get asked a lot of the questions. I was being hounded for advice. And I suppose I recognized that my knowledge was quite limited, but I really enjoyed being able to provide, advice in an area that I did enjoy. And then I remember seeing a video on the Lions team on the 2001 tour, and I saw that there was this role that was called the strength conditioning coach. So I thought, if I couldn't be a professional player, the next best job would be to work with them, and particularly in a kind of profession like that. And got involved then. I think I was like 18 or 19 when I just left school, and I was asked to come back in and just even assist with the SSC coach at school, and just really, I suppose, immerse myself there from an early stage while I was trying to find a way to become a qualified strength conditioning coach. I was studying sports management in UCD, the diploma. I didn't get the points for the degree. It wasn't very much an applied coaching course. So after 2 years doing the diploma, opted not to go directly into the degree course and got a qualification as a PT. So did a personal training course in Sallinoggin at the time for 2 years. And also did the course with the RFU, which I think they still run, the certified conditioning coaching course. Did that for a week. And I needed a work placement as part of my course at Sallinoggin at the time. And I suppose just boldly asked Liam Hennessy, who was the director of fitness at the time, at the course, if I could do some work placement with any of the teams in the RFU, willing to travel anywhere. And he put me in touch with Dave Fagan, who was involved in Leinster. And that just set me on this journey where I got to shadow how the sub-academy and academy and senior systems worked in Leinster. Any kind of midterms that I had in my course, I would be there. And then they got me involved with some regional sides. And then a job opportunity came up that they encouraged me to apply for, which was at sub-academy level. So that was to work with the underage players in Leinster, so pre-academy. Applied for that, somehow got it. I still don't know how or why. Spent a few years there, then got promoted to work as an academy SSC coach and spent a couple of years there. And yeah, throughout that journey, then I just got involved in the GA circles, and everything just, I suppose, just was expanded, and it just gave me an opportunity to work in different sports at different levels, at different age groups. And I just continued enjoying being involved as a coach, and not just enjoying coaching players, but also learning from specialist coaches in the different teams. And I suppose trying to get insights from them in terms of what they want as well from an SSC coach, and how they want their players to improve. And 15 years later, that I suppose that's taken me down a path where I still do that. I still enjoy it, but wanted to go down the route of working more on injury rehabilitation, and an opportunity then came up to work in Santry. I'm there a year now, and I'm thoroughly enjoying what I'm learning from everyone there, and trying to apply that into my coaching role with Dublin as well.
Liam Hennessy is someone you mentioned to me a couple of times. What was the biggest learning you took from working with him, or just observing what he does?
Oh God, there's a lot. I could almost spend an entire podcast talking about Liam Hennessy. I suppose I'm like incredibly grateful, because he was the person who gave me that opportunity to formally work, as a professional SSC coach. He was the person who gave me my first contract in Leinster, and he just had this vision of, I suppose, quite simply, long-term player development and long-term athletic development. Understanding that, if we want senior professional athletes to compete, and to compete meaningfully and compete year in, year out, we've got to develop those fundamental and rudimentary skills early on, and we've got to provide them with access, and build on that, and periodize that, and schedule that. So I think he was very much, he was the godfather of S&C, very much in rugby in Ireland, and I think everyone in other sports has learned an awful lot from him as well. And yeah, I think that he was probably the first person in Ireland to make everyone aware of how important long-term athletic development is.
Wow, it sounds like I have to get him on the podcast actually.
Yeah, well, most definitely.
Yeah, and in terms of kind of an early start in your career, you mentioned getting into GA circles. You joined the Dublin Senior Men's football setup. Was that 2010, 2011?
Yeah, 2009, 2010 was when I first came in. I came in year one as an assistant to Dan Tobin. Dan would have been the lead S&C coach, and then he left the following year. So going into the season of 2011, I was lucky enough to be kind of given the reins of the lead role there, and was with them until 2012, and it was a really enjoyable kind of 3-4 years with them. An opportunity to try and, I suppose, utilize some of the systems that we were using in Leinster Rugby at the time, particularly at Academy, to try and very much periodize the season, not just have S&C services during October, November, December, January in an inter-county setup, which is possibly what it was before. I know my first year involved with them, it kind of really, you were the gym guy, and you only worked with them, I think, up until about in and around the league phase, and once they went into championship, you didn't see them, and you saw them again the following October. So it was a bit kind of changing the mindset around that a little bit, and also that it meant that you weren't just the gym guy, that you got involved with speed development and conditioning on field as well. And it was a really enjoyable journey, because it was great to be involved in that process, and part of the team winning the All Ireland 2011 came with that, which was a huge bonus.
How did you find it in terms of when you speak about kind of the development there in the training, and not seeing the guys during championship? Obviously that's very different now, but even kind of the other stuff that you would have seen in the setup, what was the biggest evolution you saw under Pat at the time?
Probably I'd say his willingness to be open to seeing that there's a potential better way to do it, and that whatever we develop in maybe a 4 or 5 month window ultimately completely dissipates during the remainder of the year, until we try and rebuild that again 8 months later. That we don't isolate physical development as just like a small piece in a certain part of the season, but that it actually wave loads, and that we can overload it by all means, definitely during the preseason phase, and particularly maybe overload the strength and muscle building side of things. but that there's components to it that we want to continue on throughout the season, particularly when we want to peak. And there was a huge kind of collaborative approach there, not just with Pat, but having the medical team aligned with that. So having, James Allen as head physio and Dicey there as well, having completely bought into that and them supporting that, and having Mickey Whelan being a huge driving factor behind that as well. Like, he was Pat's right hand man, and Mickey was a huge advocate of that, and that's something he would have seen when he was involved in the States. He was a big fan of the Olympic lifts and the kind of speed strength component of your physical development, and how that should be part of the journey throughout the season, particularly when you're peaking. So I think once we kind of presented that to Pat, he was he was open to it, and like anything, we trialed it and reviewed it and refined it, and that I think that can't give enough credit for being open minded to letting us to do that.
He's often credited with kind of like Jim as the visionary for that team, but he set the foundations. Anything from a player management point of view that you would have learned, just the way he carried himself as a manager within the setup?
Yeah, he was kind of manager that probably didn't speak as often as what you might see other managers do, but when he did speak, he spoke with intent, and the room was silent. And he was really good at, I suppose, listening and learning. So when you were bringing ideas to the table, he may not always respond right there and then, and it would allow him to kind of think about it in more detail, and then come back and you'd have a further conversation about it, which is nice because he goes away and actually thinks about it, and he's not just trying to either push you aside or just give you an answer to keep you happy. And I think that was the first time, at very much at, I don't want to say at amateur level, because I think it very much discredits what was being done there. From having been involved in a couple of county teams, what you see happen at Dublin is as professional as it gets. And by all means, I'm sure it happens in other county teams as well. But it's as professional as professional sport.
Wow. In terms of then comparing, you've been involved in GAA, League of Ireland, rugby. Can you compare the setups and the way things are done within the three?
Can you compare? Look, you can, but it's probably unfair in some respects. In some setups, finances probably help an awful lot. It would be rude to ignore that. And then certain systems and the way systems operate in the background as well. So I suppose in rugby you'd have a board that's in place. They make certain decisions. I suppose irrespective of who the coaches are involved, that might not happen at county level or at League of Ireland level. League of Ireland, for example, you'll have owners that can change every couple of years, or sometimes several times within a year. So that's going to have an effect on how things are run on a day-to-day basis and within the club itself. You can use finances as an excuse, but I suppose you can't really use the attitudes as an excuse. And I think now the attitude is an awful lot different across all the sports that you've mentioned there. So having worked in League of Ireland back in 2017, there's definitely a difference in how, I suppose, the attitude and the approach is amongst players now as what it was back then. And that's quite refreshing to see as well. And it can be quite challenging because some players are on shorter contracts, some maybe slightly longer contracts, and that has its different challenges too. But players very much now in the League of Ireland look at it as a platform to really kind of push themselves beyond where perhaps in 2017 that may not have been the case. And there was a much bigger disparity amongst the attitudes across players, not only within the team but across the teams, I think, than what's placed now. I really enjoyed the year that I had with Dundalk, and the approach that players had to training and the attitude that players had to training as well. Not just training on the pitch, but training in the gym, and their I suppose their willingness to want to improve, their physical attributes to be able to perform better, recover better. Like that's just something I didn't see that was there across the full squad in 2017 as what you do now.
And in terms of then when you're getting involved with a team, and I always love asking coaches, how do you start? How do you, day one or even before day one, when you get the call to say, not only would we like to bring you in, but you say, Gran, I'm in. What do you do? How do you start?
Information gathering. Gather as much information as you can. Try to find out who's been working with them previously. I was really fortunate going into Dundalk is a really good example. And I can't quite remember how I connected with Graham Norton in the past. And it's actually really nice. I'm now working with him in Santry. He's actually just started. I think Graham actually reached out to me when I was starting in the dock, and it was great. We met up, and he was really good at providing me with, data that he had, the way he ran the structure, what he felt worked really well, even down to if he was still to be there, maybe what changes he might have going into this season. So sharing that information or being able to capture that information before going in, I think is really important. And I've always tried to do that before going into any role. And equally, I've provided that when I'm leaving, if anyone has reached out to me, and that's happened with a couple of teams. I remember after working with Longford for a season, Alan Malone was going in the following year. I met up with Alan and I did the exact same thing there, provided them with not just with data, but also with things that I felt worked well and things that I felt that if I was to do another year, that for what it would be worth, that I might change.
That's brilliant. I actually heard that recently on a coaching webinar. I think it was actually it was an event, and it was like, if within reason, obviously, if the coach isn't there, coming back or for whatever reason, but if you can try give them a ring and just ask them, and it's just breaking down a barrier, and you're probably gaining probably 10%, and even asking who are the I heard a great term yesterday, who are the characters and who is the character and who are the characters, and kind of finding even the personalities of that base. And
Yeah,
probably something that's probably it can be a bit tricky as well, obviously, if it's, say, if someone's dismissed or whatever reason, or you don't have a good relationship, you can't pick up the phone, but genuinely it's a good starting point, really.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like that, Graham was brilliant at doing that with Dundalk as well. That if the team I've worked with and that information isn't there, even getting to work with and spend time with the coaches and the managers before going in to get some of that information from them, and then finding out who the leaders are, and even scheduling some calls with them and asking them what do they feel on a personal level, something that they want to work on, and what do they feel is missing, and what do they feel would be really good to try and include. Giving them an opportunity just for you to listen, I think, has to be a starting point if you want to try and build a level of trust.
That's actually something I heard Caroline Curd speak about last year. She said, whenever I start with a team, I go straight to the captain and I go straight to the leaders. And that was actually a question I had, was in terms of going into a setup. Take Dublin for an example, where you've got really established leaders like Carla Rowe, obviously captain. How do you empower the leaders when you're kind of new and still finding your feet, not as a coach, but finding your feet within the dynamic of the whole room?
Yeah, like that was a team I was really nervous coming into, because I knew, they they'd won several All Irelands before me coming in, so I knew there was a really high expectation level. It was the first team that I'd worked with post lockdown, so it had been maybe 2 years since I'd worked with the team. So I was nervous from that point of view. I was also nervous at the level that I knew I was going into, and the expectations. And they'd worked with Cleena. Cleena was really, really well respected in the industry. Um, I'd spent some time with Mick and some of the coaches before going in to find out, because I suppose before I even say yes to a role, I was asked the manager, where do I fit in? What do you feel like? Where can I add value? I don't want to come in and just tick a box like, this is the role of an SSC coach, this is what we need them to do. Like, there's hundreds if not thousands of people that can just do that. That's fine. I get that. You need me to warm the team up, you need me to provide some gym content for them, manage some of the return to play protocols post injury, and maybe provide some nutritional protocols. Like, okay, I get that. But apart from that, what is it where do you feel, based on the skill set that I have, that I can add value? Because that's important. If they don't feel I can add value, then I've zero interest in being involved. And Mick was really good. He said, well, based on what he'd heard from, because the contact came through Paul, and I'd connected with Mick before, and there was an interest in really wanting to chase our speed. And he said, I know there's a keen interest of yours. You spent a lot of time. It's a real big passion. That's something that I feel is something we need to explore. So I said, okay, perfect. And then share their training schedule. This is what we've previously done. So then I was able to kind of shape that a little bit and then present my philosophy. And then it's about seeing, does our philosophy align? If it doesn't, there's no point either of us convincing each other it can work, because that ain't going to work. Okay. But if we look like it aligns, then we're possibly onto something. And then I presented that philosophy to the players. So I suppose that was my route into getting buy-in from not just the leaders, but from all the players, and explain to them, this is how I feel I can have an impact. And then I asked them, what do you think? Do you think, that this is doable? Because this is now going to require us to do something a little bit different than what you've done before. And it was great. They said, okay, yeah, we can see that this will take a little bit of getting used to, but we really like this. And I said to them, I'm not going to guarantee that this produces results, but let's give it a go. Let's review it after 2 months. So I came in and we started in November, we'll review it at the end of Christmas, kind of going into January, and we'll take it from there. And then I was hopeful that the players would enjoy it, number one, that they could see the benefits of it from a physical point of view as well. And that then just led into kind of going into our league phase, and we just kind of build up to it. And process to be something that was really enjoyable for them, that they could feel they're getting stronger, they're getting fitter, they're getting faster, and that's something that doesn't have to necessarily come at the cost of huge sacrifices.
How do you measure the enjoyment piece, the strength piece, beyond the numbers, beyond the piece of paper? It's like you can show a piece of paper, but it's like, do I feel stronger? Am I happier? How do you measure that as a coach?
I suppose you measure the mood through the sense that you get in the room. You would have been there. Remember when you came down for the interview, you would have we even had this. We had to move rooms for that interview because of the buzz down in the gym, right? So you can measure through simple things like the exercise choice of music playing, right, and then the response to that as well. And you can also measure through when you're asking them to do something, getting their instant feedback in response to it. You'll know when to push them after a couple of months working with them, and when to peel back. So there'll have been a couple of sessions where I'll say, look, we're going to either peel back on the training session that we've planned today, and you can instantly see a level of relief, and then that was the right call. Or for the same reason, you're going to ask them, look, based on what we planned, we're going to do a little bit more, and then you get that kind of knowledge of we're ready to do more. So I think amongst a group like that, once you spend a couple of weeks, couple of months with them, I think that's one of the best ways to get it from a subjective point of view, as well as some conversation, like finding not just through the captain, through the leaders, finding opportunities to have those kind of soft, subtle conversations. How are you finding things? How are you finding this slightly longer day in terms of adding in a 20-minute gym session on top of an already pitch session, but how that means you get an extra recovery session on top of that. And then listening to maybe some of the challenges that a few players have had with it, and maybe helping them, problem solve or navigate around that. And that then, gives the players an opportunity to maybe recognize that you're listening beyond just some, objective questionnaires or feedbacks that you're getting, or data capturing points that you're getting through your well-being stuff. It's actually you're sitting down and connecting with them and having those conversations.
Were you always conscious of that side of things? I always go back to that line, players don't care how much you know, do they know how much you care? Or who introduced you to that?
Was I always conscious of it? I don't know. Like I was very lucky. Like my early mentors, like Dave Fagan, Dan Tobin, Liam Hennessy, Jason Cowman in Leinster, like they were my early mentors, and I suppose copied what they did, rightly or wrongly. So I saw them using those kind of soft skills with the players, recognizing that there's a human that you're training above all else, apart from chasing a contract or chasing a title. You're dealing with human being. Um, Definitely, I've heard about it. But I think, I have to credit their mentorship to whether it's, like I said, it's consciously or subconsciously allowing me to kind of follow those kind of skills past.
You mentioned the mental side of things and measuring the physical side of things. Not to jump on a word you just introduced, but do you measure the well being and the other side of it, the kind of softer side of S&C, and what do you do?
Say that again. Do we measure the well being side of
The
things?
kind of the well being, the kind of, I think there was the well being word you used.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll get them to fill out on a daily basis, and we'll ask them questions like, their mood, their energy levels, their sleep quantity and quality, and we give them an opportunity as well to provide additional information if they want on whether it's stress, and apart from injuries as well. So I think that bit's important because if you don't act on that, then they just feel like they're filling it out for the sake of filling it out. Where we're using it to actively have meaningful conversations, because, like, yourself, time is very short. Like, particularly when you're working in an intercounty team compared to a professional setup, players are coming in. Some of them have the opportunity, depending on where they're traveling from, to come in maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe an hour before they have to start their active maybe prep time. Other players, for reasons outside of their control, might only, and they'll still arrive at training on time, but they might not have as much time as someone else. So you're trying to make sure that if someone is only going to maybe get there for 5 or 10 minutes before training, and you want to speak to them, that you have exactly the information you want to speak to them about, rather than you're not going to have 10 minutes to carve it out of them.
I remember having a conversation with a guest before about, and the way what I've learned from the podcast in terms of high performance sport and elite sport, it's like finding the line to like striving and pushing and reaching your potential, but not stepping over that line that it's injury, burnout, fatigue. How do you balance the well-being plus at the same time pushing and becoming the best athlete, or helping people become the best athlete they can be?
I mean, it's merging the subjective information with the objective stuff. So there's data then that we're capturing through their performance in the gym, the data we're capturing through GPS in terms of what they're doing on the pitch as well. And then it's consolidating all that information together. And that's not something you could do straight away. You don't have the answer straight away. It always takes for me, nearly took a year to find out where all the different stressors were for the players and where potential breaking points were, to then be able to try and help them navigate it. Because they don't want you to provide solutions either. Like, that's not fair. They don't, like, you're not doing them justice if all you're providing them with is answers. Sometimes that might be what they need, but I think finding a opportunity to challenge with more questions to see, can we find a collective answer, or can you provide them with finding the answer, is something that's going to be of more benefit to them, particularly medium and long term. So I think it's capturing several pieces of information and not just making a decision on one single data point. I think that's important as well.
It's like that piece of self-discovery that sometimes, as you say, you find the balance of giving the answer, but at the same time they're not going to want that every single time, and you kind of, can you push them in close enough to the right direction, but that's still that
Yeah,
self-discovery piece.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly it. Like, even if you have the answer, it's providing the question or a series of questions, so that if they find the answer, it's going to be more valuable to them. It's going to stick an awful lot more as well. So yeah, that's ultimately always the goal.
One of the questions I love asking as well is, how do you balance the individual versus the group improvement? How do you find that, or strike that balance?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Maybe it's. I think you're like, the individual fits into the team, and ultimately, you don't want their well-being to be a detriment not only to them but to the team. So I think Even it has to be like a people first approach above all else, and that then ultimately feeds into the team. So I think I can't think of a point where I've ever tried to make a decision that would be in any way, shape, or form be better for the team, but not better for the person. So I think probably the best way to think of it is like the balance just always lies in favor of the person, and getting them to recognize ultimately that it is a team sport and that everything that they're doing is to be part of that team. Um, but every 1% that they can have or impact positively benefits them and benefits the team. I suppose if that's a good way of answering it. Um, yes, that's a good question. I'm not sure about fully answer that or not. You caught me
No,
on that one.
yeah, and that's, do you know what, I ask everyone, and everyone has a different answer, and I don't know what the answer is, and it's like, again, it's that kind of discovery part, and it really comes down to, like, chatting to you, Sammy, and seeing you in action as well. A lot of this comes down to your emotional intelligence and
Yeah,
reading the room, reading the player, and finding the person first, as you said. And I love the way you said person first, because it's the person and then it's the athlete, and that's the biggest thing I've learned from being around yourself and all these incredible coaches is you treat the person and then you treat the player.
yeah. I think like this, there definitely can be situations where sometimes someone might find something difficult, or why do they have to do something extra? Um, and again, like I'm always just trying to reframe it that this is to improve their performance, and then as a byproduct, that improves the team's performance. They are not being punished to do something extra. Like ultimately, I always say this to my players: you don't have to do anything. Like I'm providing you with guidelines. I'm here to mentor and coach you, and I'm here to help you all the time. But at no point do you have to do this. Like if a player turns around and goes, I don't want to do this, I would say, fine, that's absolutely no problem. And I won't judge you for it either. Like I'm just here to support you, you know? And if you've got a strong rationale for why you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. Um, Now, if it's the wrong reason, that's something we can discuss later. But I never want someone to feel like they have to do something and that ultimately it's, you know, my way or the highway. You know, I hope very much so that anything I've asked any player to do, that I've provided them with some knowledge and a rationale behind why they're doing it. And it's definitely something I'm always trying to improve. Probably something I didn't do very well early on in my career, um, but something I find, and specifically with female athletes, I think is really important. A lot of guys won't challenge you, and they don't even care. If you say jump, they say how high, even if it's not the right thing to do. We're working with female athletes is really good for you because you get challenged all the time, and that's a good thing. So that ultimately you are doing the right thing. You know, you're not throwing random shit against the wall hoping someone but sticks. If you haven't got an answer for why you're doing something, well, then there's if you have to be comfortable being challenged as a coach, like that's not a criticism. You should be able to be challenged and provide them with a rationale for why. And even through that discovery, if you find it that through discussion that there's a better opportunity or a more collaborative approach of doing something like that, that is also good. Um, so hopefully, yeah, I've never, you know, made anyone feel like they had to do something and there was no way around it. It's always been, at least I hope, with them, you know, recognizing that they understood why they were doing it and that there was always a bigger picture to it.
Hmm. How do you find it then, kind of introducing a new player into a setup that might not be used to, stepping up to League of Ireland, or coming from a rugby academy into a senior side setup, or coming from an underage county team to adult? How do you balance that piece, because there's a lot on them to get up to speed, and not just in the gym but skills, lifestyle, carrying yourself like a elite athlete? How do you help kind of bring them in and introduce that side of things?
You used to very quickly try and find out what level they're at, and then just layer it up, just build up the like one of the biggest challenges, and that's quite overwhelming for them initially, is actually just seeing how many people are around at county level compared to probably at club level. Perhaps at club level, outside of the manager, you might have maybe just even a coach or training, and that could be it. But there might be no more in terms of backroom staff. When you come into a county team, you'll have 10 plus people involved there. So just even getting them used to understanding who everybody is, and that, you, and making them also feel very comfortable about asking any question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Getting them used to understanding the schedule. So have you got access to, I mean, this might sound very simple, but like, have you access to the schedule? Do you know when the next training session is? Do you know where that is? Because it might be at a different venue. You know, those things will be different from team to team. If they're playing with a club team, it's probably the same venue all the time. Sometimes in certain county systems or county teams, the gym session might be at one venue, the pitch session might be at another venue, or the pitch session that's on a Wednesday is in one venue, the one that's on Friday or Sundays at a different venue. So providing with real clarity around, understanding that they have access to the schedule, they can understand it, that they know who to talk to, if they can't make it, even simple things like are you able to get to that training session? Like, do you need a hand with this? Like, can we link you with another player to help alleviate that? And then just even finding out, like, what is their current training background like? Are they used to going to the gym? If they are, great, what are the lifts that they're currently performing? Try and find an entry point to safely introduce them into. So, and making them realize, like, I'm not expecting you, and we are not expecting to be able to do everything that everyone else is doing here from the get-go. Giving them time to kind of go through that journey. So I suppose, yeah, in a nutshell, just communicating and getting them to feel comfortable around the area that they're coming into, or the environment that they're coming into. And then from a training point of view, and this bit is really, really important, is very quickly trying to establish what level they're at so that you can safely introduce them and then gradually build them up and really, I suppose, do as good a job as possible, particularly if they're coming in at a slightly lower level, to get them to recognize that that's okay and that you can help them. And that's just going to take a little bit of time. So I suppose setting the expectations very early on, I think, is really, really important as well.
And even going back to the basics of, can you get to the session? The session might be somewhere else, or even just the people around the group. And it's like, because that's actually a really good point. It's like, you're probably coming into a setup now that has way more people. You might have 2 physios, 2 S&C coaches, multiple coaches on the pitch in whatever sport it is. And it's like, just even getting used to the different faces as your teammates, but also as a support staff. It's like, who do I go to if I can't make training, or can I get a lift? And it's like, you can do it on your own, but there's a helping hand here, and I can help you with way more than just the strength side of things. And it goes back to then you're showing the care and the trust, and then it all starts there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's particularly overwhelming for someone who who wasn't involved in some of the underage setups, because at least that's somewhat of a stepping stone. If it's a player that hasn't been involved in that, they haven't got something to compare against or measure to. So, yeah, no, really well put.
In terms of then, my favourite question, I've just keep lashing all these questions at you, is, and I got to ask Orla Curran yesterday at the coaching event, and whenever I've one question to ask a coach, I always ask them this: when everyone's on the same playing field in terms of physicality, I think of like the Irish rugby team, when they're all the same, or the Dublin team, they're all the same level of physical ability and Olympians. What separates the All-Stars from the rest, the players of the year from the rest, the gold medalists from the rest? What makes the elite of the elite different from the rest of the pack?
Good question. There's a few. So for a few that I recognize is the girls and guys that are at the top. Like, those are the elite. They have this incredible ability to switch on and switch off. So what I mean with that is, like, when they're there, they're all in. Nothing is going to distract them. Okay. They're able in the warm up and prep, like during the phase where it's time to have a bit of banter, a bit of fun, they can do all that. They're great at really doing that. And then you just notice there's a time when the switch is turned on and it's turned on. That separates them from those who can't do it. And what I mean with that is also, when the session finishes, they turn it off, and they're able to turn it off, and they're able to leave training and go back to wherever it is they're going home to, or whatever job it is they're going to, or whatever it might be that they're doing outside of that environment, and they're able to park and compartmentalize that, and they're able to give whatever level of time that's required away from training in terms of prep, analysis, whatever it might be. And then when they do it again, that's the time for me to do it. I turn it on, and when I finish, I turn it off. So it's not all encompassing all the time. So that's one thing I think they're really good at doing. The other one is, and you mentioned, but I think you interviewed Goldie, and it's really powerful. So they have the ability to, recognize when they're a plus, when they're a neutral, and when they're a minus. So ultimately, when I view that, is they have this incredible self-awareness of if they are not performing at the best of their ability, that they can recognize that, and when someone brings that to their attention, that they're able to allow other people around them to bring that up. Okay. Because those who can't do that see that as negative, closed-minded, and that those who, like you said, that can stand out, that are at the elite, amateur or professional, they have that ability to recognize when they're a neutral, when they're a minus, and how they have to get from a minus to neutral, from a neutral to a plus. And they are able to openly take on the advice or be carried if they need to from the others around them. I think when you combine that with the ability to switch on, switch off, I think those are the two things that I've recognized over the last decade and a half between both professional sport and amateur sport. And I hate calling it amateur sport because it's amateur from a point of view that the players don't get paid. It is not amateur, be it for whether it's their attitude or their time, their time commitment. You've seen it; it is incredible. I don't think players at intercounty level get enough credit for what they do across all the teams and both codes. It's just like male and female. It's until you're involved in it, it's actually mind blowing how professional it is.
And that line actually came from, just a bit of backstory. I interviewed Sinead Goldrick, and I asked her what's the difference between being here in Dublin and being part of what's called an amateur setup, and being down in Australia, being part of a professional AFLW setup. And she came out with that line and said she heard it from a rugby player, and I don't know who it is, and I've tried to find out and I still can't find it. And I actually shared it with Andy Friend, who I spoke to recently, and I was like, wait till you hear this. And he's like, that is brilliant. And he didn't know, I don't think he knew who it was either, but she said, and I'll never forget her saying it to me, she was like, you can either professionalism or attitude is a choice. You can be a plus, a minus, or coast along and be a neutral in a setup, and it's up to you whether you're adding, taking away, or giving, or having someone there. And I'll leave the link into the interview, but it's just, I actually got goosebumps when she said it to me, and I was like, that is why she has gotten to the level she has gotten to, because that line to me was just incredible.
The other thing is, you'll have players outside of formal captains and that are not officially part of the leadership group, that lead by example, and they tick all those boxes, and that's why they are who they are. And that's the more of those type of players you have in the team, the greater chance you have of having success. And that's not easy. And sometimes players will feel like, unless I'm a leader, officially labeled a leader, I don't have to lead. That's not the case. You will lead through many other ways, and that, what we've talked about, that's one of them. And that's how younger players will have seen players like Goldie come back into the system this year, and Goldie leads in so many ways, and when youngsters see the level of detail that she applies, and what you talked about there, that's what separates. And you're right, that's a choice. You don't have to make that. And you'll see it in a lot of teams where it's tough. Certain players aren't getting picked. They're not progressing along the ranks they want. The ones who will continue adding value are the ones who are doing exactly what we talked about and doing it for the right reasons. And that's when you've got a solid team that has a really good chance of competing.
I also asked Orla Curran about that yesterday, and I always ask that question. It's how do you teach that then? But we kind of discussed how it comes back to the environment, And it's like sometimes you actually can't teach that, and sometimes it's innate, and it comes from whether it's younger coaches at underage and being at home. But is there a way of cultivating that within, let's say there's an 18-year-old that joined the setup, saw Sinead Goldrick do that this year. How do you continue to cultivate that at long-term level? Any thoughts on that one? I know that's also now a really difficult question.
Yeah, it was a good question. I think like it has to lie somewhere in around being comfortable with asking everyone why they are there. Yeah. Like we can't be afraid to ask ourselves or the players, why are you here? What again, like back to the question you asked me, like how do I integrate myself in the team? Like first I asked, like, how can I add value? I'm not afraid to ask that. Like I'm not afraid. I'll have had conversations with managers, and if it didn't align, like there are jobs that I didn't go into, you know, and at times like I would have needed it, but I wasn't for the right reason. So I think if we are not afraid to ask those questions, and ultimately if we have everyone there that's there for the right reasons, I think that cultivates itself. That's important. We have to know that we're there, why we are there, and we have to be comfortable with asking the question, and we have to be comfortable with answering the question as well. If we're there for the right reason, I think that environment will grow and will cultivate from season to season. And I think it's important to then have that nice diversity and mix as well of players who've been there for several years, who've won a couple of All Irelands, those who have only maybe won one or two, and then those who haven't won anything. Because if you just have a squad of 25 plus year olds, what happens when the majority of them retire one season? You've no succession line. So I suppose one way of growing and cultivating that is ensuring that's the big challenge then from a management point of view, or from a manager's point of view, of having depth charts that I suppose that are appropriately aligned to that as well, and having players there in the right positions and good people as well, like the right people. And I think that I mean, just this day and age, I don't think you survive if you're not like you'll be ran out of there by the players, never mind the coaching staff. You just want to it just doesn't I don't see it happen anymore. You've seen it happen like years ago. It just doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah, that's what came back to. I was in Stanford and I asked one of their coaches, like, what, kind of around the question of good players and stuff. She was like, comes down to actually having really good people in the building and in around the group, and that's when it's kind of bringing together that culture piece and all that kind of what some people call the fluffy stuff. But I think to me, it's without that, it just doesn't happen on the pitch without that sort of thing. But when you mentioned switch off, I think that was actually the first time I've heard someone give me an answer about switching off. And it reminds me of John Kiley said in an interview, could have been a couple of years ago, said, you can't switch on until you switch off. How do you give that kind of the consistent sort of always want to improve, always pushing, driving, improving, striving attitude, that permission to switch off? Is that, like, I find it like, all these characters we speak about, and there's probably people listening that will think of a player that we don't know that is always trying to be better, but it's like, how do we get them to switch off? How do you teach them that?
I try and kind of reframe a little bit similar to actual training physical qualities. If we just spent every hour in the gym training all the time, ultimately we're not giving the body an actual opportunity to recover and adapt. So from a training physical quality point of view, you make the improvements or the adaptations happen actually away from the training session itself. So you provide the stimulus, you need your window of recovery. So from a point of view to, I suppose, restore, rebuild, and then super compensation to take place to come back, for the following session and be stronger. And there's also a fine balance between how much intensity and volume we give ourselves in training. And obviously, as we grow, as we become, as we develop as athletes, we can start to tolerate more intensity and more volume. But ultimately, we still need time to recover. And if we don't give ourselves time to recover, and we don't we don't invest in the right, I suppose, modalities to recover, then we can't come back and apply the next training session with the most intent possible. So the same comes from the actual physical training side, or the sports skills side, and the mental side of thinking about training. There's only so much quality we can provide ourselves with before it starts to diminish. So I try to reframe it to them and say, well, look, this is how much time we're spending to our, say, gym sessions in terms of developing strength, or we're working on speed, or our conditioning. This is how we integrate our conditioning. And ultimately, this is what your training weeks look like. So develop the same amount of time, or not the same amount, but compartmentalize what you want from a, I suppose, analysis point of view as well, and all the other aspects that you feel will want to make yourself a better player. But ultimately, if you're not giving yourself any downtime, if you're not able to switch off from any of this, where do you recover? Where are the adaptations going to take place? And you need to have things outside of training as well to be able to distract you from them, so that when you arrive, you're giving yourself permission to switch it on and then give it everything you can. So the quality is there, because ultimately it's the quality that we're looking for.
Yeah. Is that the toughest challenge during the year, during a long season, to keep the quality, the intensity going?
Is it the toughest challenge? It's a really good question. Um, it can be at phases, definitely. I think there's definitely stages where I think it becomes a challenge to manage time on feet out. I say like quotations, outside of formal training time, because during the summer months when there's more daylight and perhaps players will feel they have more time, whether it be college players or maybe some players that are teachers, so they have more time to be able to delegate the things. You're trying to encourage them to spend whatever time they are on training or skills to be meaningful and of high quality, so that they don't fall between what I call the gray area. That it's just volume of volume, and that's where, we talked about this before, that's where our color coding system kind of came in. And then and to give him credit, I got that concept from Peter Wright. He talked about that on his podcast. I think it's called the PD Performance Podcast. And I then chatted to him about it when he had me on as a guest. And then when I started with the Dublin Ladies team, myself and Mossy Landman, he was the physio with us the first year. He really loved the concept as well. So collectively, we both approached Mick, the manager, and the coaches with how we could color coordinate volume and intensity in our training sessions, not only throughout the week or any given training session, but from week to week and face to face, and educating players on that, where the importance around, like, if we're having a green session, which is lighter in intensity, what we don't want then is you to be spending extra time increasing more volume or even potentially more intensity with stuff you're doing outside of training, because that's going to, have a negative impact on your recovery, which we are trying to appropriately plan and wave load, so that we can, when we're looking to hit our amber and our red sessions, that you're appropriately primed for them. So there's an element there where, is it tougher throughout the season? I think it's tougher towards the peak end of the season, and it falls in line with when players have a little bit more time. I think it's easier to, I hate to use the words manage, but it's easier to manage that early on. And in the mid stages, it's probably maybe just a little bit more challenging with college players. And then in the later stage of the season, it's a bit more challenging with players who have more time on their hands.
I'm conscious I'm now quoting Orla Curran in every second question that I ask, but we actually spoke about that yesterday, and she showed us the plan for the sevens. And again, it was back to the colour scheme, and what we were talking about was, it wasn't to give players that kind of thing of, oh, grand, tomorrow it's green, grand, like kind of let off. It was from a fueling perspective, even to be aware that, okay, Wednesday is red is absolutely, as she said, flat to the mat, there's no let up, and it's like, right, I have to prepare and fuel, not only fuel, but mentally prepare myself for that. And it's about finding, and even they would use it from a coaching perspective as well. Again, it goes back to that colour thing of, they would rag, so they would red, amber, green, and that's from a skills perspective, that's from the gym, and just giving players that visual kind of aid as well of, I think if you can try link things to stories and colours, it just gets that bit of buy-in and maybe a bit of freshness to something they're not used to.
Yeah, it also allows them to prepare. Like, it's ultimately, I think we've moved away from turning up for training and discussing before training what we're going to do, you know? Um, and like, it's not that long ago that that was still the done thing, right? And it's funny in one sense, but it's mad to think that that was still done. And perhaps is still done in some teams and at some levels. But if we can provide players with an awareness of what's happening, and some players only want to know what's happening the week in advance, it allows them, like you said, from a shooting point of view, to shape, do they need to have more food prepped or less food prepped? For really tough sessions, depending on their kind of work schedules, it may mean they have the opportunity to perhaps make that work day a little bit lighter for them. Maybe offload a few meetings and put them on to the following day, or schedule them a little bit earlier. That they're the 1%ers, and that helps. And it allows them to also recognize, they then see, we're planning. And we've moved away from just figuring out on the day what we're going to do, or throughout the session what we're going to do. And I think when they see that, they hold themselves up to a much higher level of accountability as well, much higher standard. And again, we talked about how do we create that meaningful and long-lasting culture where we lead by example. So if they can see the management are very proactive in that, but then they all of a sudden recognize that they have to do the same things, and they then realize that if that level of detail and planning is going to what they're doing, ultimately that has to be reciprocated.
How do you find it in terms of, I've asked selectors, managers, and I'm interested to get your perspective. I don't think I've asked a strength and conditioning coach their point of view, but keeping players that are in a return to play protocol, or just injured, or just not getting game time, how do you keep them engaged and motivated during the season?
Good question. I suppose an injured player is probably treated slightly differently than someone who isn't being selected, from a point of view of they're not playing because they're currently injured. But still, with that, you're engaging with them as to, again, I think I mentioned this earlier. We want to, we have to get a level of what's the word I'm looking for here? My mind's gone blank. The expectation outcome needs to be aligned with them understanding and recognizing where they're at right now, and what the steps are involved to getting them back to play. In their mind, sometimes all they care about is timelines. Like, how many weeks, how many days, how many games is back to play? And I can recognize that. And we're trying to reframe it as in, like, well, based on the type of injury or where you're exactly at, like, these are the markers that we need to hit and address. And this is the workload that's evolved. And when we move from that phase, then we move to this next stage. And I can give you, like, for a lot of things, some guidelines there, definitely. And, sometimes, and we may move ahead, we may not. And if we're not, I get communicate with them as to why that is. So that's the kind of process I try and use with players. And I make it very visual for them as well, so they recognize exactly what stage they're in right now, and what stage it'll be that they'll be in when they're back into the, I suppose, competitive training phase. And it's integrated. I don't like that you're just solely with us or with the rehab group, and then all of a sudden when that is finished, then you're completely with the team. There's a certain point in time in that rehab phase where they start to integrate in some, like, non-contact skills, then into some more challenging skills that involve reactive, and then gradually build up their contact, and then their actual load exposure to that. So that maybe addresses the injured player. There is a challenge with the player that isn't playing, and it's about finding out why. And this is key, because are they not playing because they're not skillfully good enough, or are they not playing yet? So is it a skill? Like, is there a gap in the skill point, or is the gap currently physical? And whichever, or is it both? And whichever one it is making sure that that's being supplemented with in the background. So on game day, like this last year, whoever wasn't in the match day squad did a training session that day, and would shape very much that session from a physical point of view of what their primary focus is. So if it's strength, that session would primarily focus on strength. If it was power, it would be power focus. If it was energy, like conditioning or energy system development based, it would be that. And again, the key thing is communicating that if that happens consistently over several weeks or several games, as to that there is a plan and a program in place for getting them up to a point in time where they may be able to compete and actually look for some game time. So yeah, does that answer that one? Because
Yeah, it
it is
does.
important, and like, you know, there's nothing worse than at the end of the season if a player is told, oh, you didn't get as much. If a player asks, there's an element of onus here on the player as well. So I will say that, and I'm not fobbing off that the management team shouldn't be proactive about it. They 100% should. But I suppose as a management team, you're also looking for players to voice a level of, well, if they're not asking any questions at any stage, you want them to want to be part of that process as well. Um, but there'd be nothing worse if a plan isn't put in place and at the end of the season a player asks, I got no game time at all, or I got 3 minutes of league time throughout the entire season. What's the crack? And then it's like, you're not big and strong enough. Okay, well, if I'd have known that 4 months ago, it would have been nice if I was given an opportunity to do some extra sessions, because, I would have at the very least made a bit more of this season. Do you know what I mean with that? So I think it's
Exactly.
it's
No,
making sure
100%.
that regularly, the management team is looking at the depth chart and recognizing if, a player or a group of players isn't getting as much game time, that whenever the gap is, like I said, whether it's skill or physical or if it's a combo, that they're being supported with that in the background.
But as you say, 100% as well goes on an athlete to not wait until October and your club season's done and you're looking for next year, whether it's club or county or whatever, and you say, well, why didn't I get game time? It's like, well, you actually need to be checking in at the same time of what can I do, and challenging.
Yeah,
And even the challenging it comes with such a negative kind of permutation. It's like just picking up the phone or having a coffee with yourself or whoever it is and just being like, I want to play more. How do I do it?
yeah.
And going after that and doing that from January, February, all the way, instead of waiting till December, planning for next year. December is too late anyway. But I think you know what I mean. There's a balance to be struck with it.
Yeah, and I sometimes have players reach out to me at club level and want a program for the off season, and they'll tell me this is what I need to work on. And before I will do some kind of assessments, like in a needs analysis from a physical point of view, I always ask them, have you sat down with your manager and asked them what do they feel you need to work on? Because if you haven't, start with that. Because it's always really, it's important to know, what does the manager feel is the, but not only the skill, but what does your manager feel is your current physical limitation, or does he think you need to, or does she think you need to work on from a physical point of view, so that we incorporate that into your off season. So at the very least, you can come back to pre-season feeling like you've addressed that, and I said above all else that you're showing a level of ownership to asking them, go, okay, this is, I want to spend some time and dedicate X amount of time during my off season. What do you think I need to work on?
Absolutely. From a selfish point of view, my own team was knocked out of championship last weekend, so I'm doing my own formal review of myself and getting feedback from players and the setup. Do you often ask for feedback? How do you go about it? Any insights you could offer on that?
Yeah, like there's a couple of ways of doing it. It's always good to try and reflect. You can do like a very big deep dive, and I think ask everyone, and I've done that before as well. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes maybe players don't think too much about that, and then you review and you look at what they all say they want to improve on, and it's actually something they don't even, they're actually very good at already. So um, sometimes you've got to take that a little bit with a pinch of salt. I think it is important to definitely ask a few key figures in terms of what they feel works well, not just in terms of like the I suppose the scientific principles of what you're trying to improve, but even the flow of sessions and the proximity of where it is in the week. Um, what are the challenges that they currently find? Is it travel, like logistics? Are there and I always back it up with, when you're asking questions, ask them to also provide a solution. So you just don't want someone to say, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Okay, brilliant, that's great. How do you think it could be better? Because you can ask anyone what's not working well, and then you can ask anyone what they don't like. But if you're not asking them for a reasonable solution to it, all you're getting is is an opinion. And opinions are great and all, but if we want to provide, if we want to improve, we have to look towards finding solutions. Sometimes there will be solutions, sometimes there won't. Sometimes someone doesn't like doing a 20-minute gym session at the end of training because they're tired, and I get that. But if for the majority of the squad that means that we get 2 extra rest days, doing an extra 20 minutes twice per week is possibly a better solution. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find I suppose an optimal plan. Optimal isn't the best for everyone. We recognize that, but optimal for the team is what's key. And that might actually, this might take us back to what we talked about earlier, which is like, how do you discuss something with a player and you find that what they want might not be something that they feel is best for the team, or maybe it's not the right way of phrasing it, but like, I have had conversations like that before. And it's about creating dialogue. It's really important, openly talking about it and recognizing that this currently giving, the logistic challenges that we have gives us a more optimized weekly plan, which is ultimately what we're looking to do, is optimize performance. And, limiting travel is a solution here, and we're here anyway. What's an extra 20 minutes? What that does mean is we have to be just a little bit more sensible about our fueling strategies. Yes, it may mean you get home a little bit later, and it ultimately might mean that night's sleep is a little bit disrupted. But then knowing, and we're planning ahead, and you have the schedule, let's work as hard as we can to make sure that we're making up for it with the night's sleep the night before and also the night after. And again, having the discussions around that, I think, is really important.
Totally. And it goes back to, again, the empowerment and giving them, like, even asking their, not just getting an opinion of what you think. It's like, well, give me a solution. It's like, well, actually, if you give me a solution, I take it on board. It's like, okay, well, Sammy actually listened to me, or Orla listened to me, and now we're actually doing it. That's actually my idea. So I'm going to buy into it a bit more. And probably if I hear someone else giving out, it's like, well, actually, that was my idea. Get on board, because we have a solution, sort of thing.
Yeah. The one thing we tried to do last year, it was, we wanted to find a way to offload the nights we spend training. So like the gym night is a big one. We have one standalone gym session. We microdose 2 others. So we discussed it, and we felt like, well, what if we introduce a Tuesday morning gym session instead of a Tuesday evening gym session? And again, everything comes down to trade-offs. Okay. So again, we're trying to find an optimal solution here, and it involves trade-offs. The trade-off with going early morning for everyone means we have to get up earlier. Okay, it means it's a 6 o'clock gym session for one group and a 7 a.m. gym session for the second group. Okay, the first group will be primarily players who have to be at their jobs by, let's say, 8, half 8, and the second group will inevitably involve students. The second group, naturally, even if they arrive at 7, are a group that would prefer to train at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock, or more than likely, they might even prefer to train that evening. The first group will be the one who really recognize this means we have Tuesday night off. And that means we're only training Wednesday and Thursday night. So we recognize the importance of our gym session. We absolutely love it. So we introduced that year one. We don't want that removed. But we want to find a way, can we optimize a little bit more of how many evenings we get free pre a certain phase of the year. And that's something we said, well, let's try it. Let's try it pre-Christmas. And we actually pre-Christmas did that 2 mornings a week, and they, once they got used to it, because it involves being a little bit better prepped with food, sleep, etc. And they loved it. So when we reduced it to the one morning a week, it was a little bit easier when we then went back to our pitch training sessions. And actually, when we removed them, we went back to the Tuesday evening pitch sessions, come the kind of summer months. All of a sudden, the players who hated it earlier on in the year were missing it. So it's funny, like it's, we're trying to recognize, or we're trying to get players to recognize that we're trying to find ways to free up time for everyone. We're trying to improve performance without sacrificing more. And it's just trying to find, can we create some ways of doing that where, you get some more time back. And like I said, every one of them comes with trade-off. So like I said, doing your 20 minutes gym microdosing at the end of a pitch session instead of doing it on a standalone day means that you're staying for longer, you get home a little bit later. So that's one way of looking at the trade-off. The alternative trade-off is you get a full day off. So
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. No, 100%. And it's trying to find the balance again between the individual and the team, and there's no direct way of doing it. But the one thing I'll take a few things from this conversation. That's one of them is when I'm doing a review, and just because it's in my head now is why I asked. It's like, okay, well, give me your opinion on this, but give me a solution if you have an issue with it, or if you have something to add, give me a solution. Is there any, when we talk about players' potential, and the saying potential is only on paper comes up in my head, but what are the biggest barriers that you think players put in their own way to reaching their potential? And I'll cheat a bit and remove injury, like injury. I think like sometimes you're just really tough and you're stuck with injury and all that kind of thing. But is there anything that players do to themselves that they kind of get in their own way of reaching their potential?
Yep, they're limiting beliefs. They limit their belief of what they can achieve, and um it can be a huge barrier when players come in, and hopefully with enough time and coaching time and spending time with players around them, they can actually remove those limiting beliefs. Because I think one of the biggest challenges when you come into, I think, an inter-county setup is just the speed of play. Like, it's just much faster than the club level. Same like in the women's game and the men's game. You have less time on the ball. You have less time to make decisions. You're going to have to cover ground an awful lot faster. So there's the physical attributes as well as the skill. So there's a settling in phase, definitely goes without saying. And it's giving them the time to settle in, and then getting them to recognize that, that they have the capacity to do so. And if for whatever reason something is missing, that they're given the support around building that up. And it's great to see, like, when you see some of the youngsters come in year one, and then you see them starting year two, and they start year two, how they finished year one, you recognize that limiting belief has been removed. And I can only imagine it must be daunting for some players who come in as an 18 or 19-year-old, playing with players, who are their idols, who they've watched, who they've got to see in Croke Park play over the last 4 or 5 years. And now they're talking beside them. They're sitting beside them in the changing rooms. They're having conversations with them on a day-to-day basis. And they're now lying out with them, that year in Croke Park, or in the previous year they were watching the play. So I think limiting beliefs is the big one, and it's providing them with, guidance, support around that. So we're very lucky in Dublin to have Reds are going to support us with that. And I think that's it's a huge area on the sports side of things that I don't think gets enough respect and doesn't get enough acknowledgement.
And it goes back to, as well, a player told me this before, and I referenced it loads of times on the episodes, and she said, don't just be happy to be here. You have to push me to be better, because I don't get better unless you push me. So do not be happy about being around here in this group. It's like, you push me. And I was like, holy shit. I was 17. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
In terms of then, what's the biggest misconception of being or building an elite high performance team that you think is out there at the moment?
Biggest misconception. What's a good one? No. Probably, like, if you're not involved, like, you just see the tip of the iceberg, right? So it's hard for, friends and family to understand what's involved, unless they're living with the person and they can see it. Outside of that, they probably just see that a training session plan, which might be 90 minutes once per week and 70 minutes another day per week, and there's a 60-minute gym session plus the 20 minutes and then the game. But that's easy. Like, that's all you're doing, right? What's the biggie there, How is that tough? Like, how do you struggle to fit that in to your schedule. What they don't see is the time involved to get to and from the training session, the time involved in prepping for the training sessions, even it's like having the right gear, making sure you get your meals prepped, dedicating some time to rehab if you've got some injuries and you've got to stay on top of like some prep work, either before training or after training or on non-training days, your video analysis, and saying no to certain things that you can't do. That's probably really tough. People don't get that. Like, I think it's really tough for people to say, look, why can't you still come? Like, you don't have to drink. Like, just like leave at midnight and drive home. They don't get it. You're training at 8 o'clock the next morning, like leaving at midnight. Yes, you're training at 8, but you probably need to be up at 6 to get a proper amount of fuel. There's a little bit of top up and travel. So that means you only have 6 hours sleep that night. Is that really the best preparation for a Sunday morning training session? Probably not. Maybe you can get away with it, but probably lies more in the line of like, it's not optimal, shall we say, and get trade-offs. So I think people don't really understand the trade-offs involved for players who commit to intercounty training. I think they also don't recognize the hours of footage that the management and the coaching staff watch, and the work that goes on behind the scenes from the planning and preparation, analyzing, interpreting, and then everyone does it because they love it. But I think it's really hard for people when they're not involved to recognize exactly what's involved. And until you're a fly in the wall, I think it probably is. I'd say it's very eye opening. No, and I think and that doesn't happen by accident either. Like, that is evolved, and it's an evolving environment, because you want to provide the players with the best resources, the best skills. You want to provide them with the best so that they can really go out and compete and show what they're made of. You also want them to enjoy it. And then we mean that, like, they will see each other in years to come. They won't remember a lot of the wins, funny enough. They'll probably remember more of the journeys home from bad losses. And you want to create meaningful connections. Like, really, because if we're not creating meaningful connections, then why are we doing it? You know, it's for me, it's more, I get more out of seeing someone that I've worked with years ago stopping me and just having a quick conversation, and then introducing me to like my wife and my kids, or telling them I used to coach someone. And if they're stopping me to say hi, then I feel like I've had a meaningful impact in their journey as a player. If they're ignoring me, I've messed up, you know? So it's about creating like really meaningful connections, because in years to come, they'll get together, they'll have reunions, and they'll talk about, not don't get me wrong, talk about some of the wins as well, but I'd say the majority of their memories will be based on like some of the journeys that they've been on after some really bad losses, or some, you know, like grueling training sessions that they had and how they, you know, persevered and came through. But like that, like, you know, and Mick is really strong on that, to be fair. And he, like, and I've mentioned before, it's people first, and it's meaningful connections, because why else would we ask players to dedicate anywhere between 10 to 20 hours a week, you know? Like,
yeah, that's actually, I don't know if I put it in the interview, or if I ended up chatting with Mick for about 90 minutes before we even recorded anything that week, and we were talking about that training camp, and he was like talking about, like, he was like, if we're not having fun, like, why are we bothering? And I was like, I remember just taking that away. He's like, if they can't, like, if we can't mix up the group and them have the crack, why are we here?
yeah.
And I was like, that's class. And I was like, I didn't expect that. And that was there was a couple of things that kind of blew my mind that week. And that was one of them. Was like, if we're not enjoying it, like, why are we doing it? And I was like, God, like, the All-Ireland champions are basing everything on enjoyment. There's something in this.
Yeah,
Like,
like
yeah,
that training camp was a really good example. Like, yeah, even for the management as well. Like, I missed a training camp this year. I was gutted. It just clashed with my family holiday, and that's just the reality. And that those are the things we all have to balance as well. There's certain things that I'm just going to miss. There's certain things I definitely can't miss. But the training camp the year before, like the management even together, just was such good crack. Like, we went down, just the day before everyone and played golf together and just like really get on well with each other. And we have to, because if we don't, then like,
but the players will see it.
yeah,
The players
that's
can't see it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And if we don't, if we actually meaningfully don't get on with each other, and we don't have to spend every minute of every day with each other, right? But like, if we can't get on and have like some solid common ground and good crack, and we do so, and we won't agree on everything, but we'll be really like professional about what we do and don't agree on, and we'll always work through it. Like you said, if the players see that, like, then how are they going to get through stuff that they don't agree with?
yeah. 100%. 100%. I couldn't agree more. Come here. I have to bring this podcast to a close because I feel like
Yeah.
we've been here for 3 hours. I'm going to wrap this up with the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. I've missed saying that. It's been about 6 months since I've recorded. Sammy, your favourite quote, what is it? I feel like I know what it is, but I don't want to ruin it for myself.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, it's a strong one. Like, it's well, for me anyway. And it's, be stubborn on visual. Oh, sorry, be stubborn on your vision, but be flexible with your detail. And it's just about it again. It talks so strongly about like kind of my coaching journey and my philosophy. And it ultimately it's about it's about being open minded as well. But also be true to yourself.
Best sporting event you've been to, and you can pick one as a fan and then one you've been involved in.
Oh, one is a fan. I went to see the New York Knicks play in
Class.
a couple of years ago. They played the Utah Jazz, so it was cool to experience an NBA game. Like, the
It's
Americans
not
still had
about
to
the
do it.
basketball. It's about
No,
everything but the basketball.
yeah, pretty much, yeah. So that was pretty cool. That was cool to see as a fan.
Deadly. Any standout one that you've been involved in as a coach?
It's double. Like, I can't pick out the men's final from the women's final. Like, both of them, like hair on your neck kind of experience. Just you know, can't be Crow Park, and 2011 was unbelievable, and it was matched by 2023. Like, it was surreal, and both of them for the exact same reason. Like, we went in as underdogs, and nobody in the country outside of Dublin in both years gave us a chance. And there's something very, very sweet about that.
Absolutely. Is there a moment with both of those years that you envisioned during the year that you're like, not that we haven't won, but it's like, Jesus, we have a shot? Was there a moment that you realised in both those years?
In the men's one, it came down to the internal games. So it was my like second year working with the men's team, and I mean, I was a newbie when it came to the JA in Croke Park. Like, back then, it's not and I don't know why it's not like that now anymore. But like, the Leinster Championship games were jam packed. I remember playing. I think we played Wexford in the Leinster semi final. No, we played Wexford in the final. We played Kildare in the semi final. I remember playing in the semi final, and it was jam packed. And then the same against Wexford. That was Leinster, and that grew from game to game to game. And what you saw on the pitch was incredible, but what you saw in the internal training games was just another level. It really was. Like, when you saw the two teams go play against each other, I got a sense of like, if they can just produce this on the pitch, they can be carried. So that, from that point of view, I think in 2023 we had like two bad losses on the road, one against Galway early on in the league, and then one against Kerry as well. The training camp, when we came back to the training camp, was the point when you could really feel the team kind of knitting together. And I think when you get that sense of cohesion, and you know that there's this belief there, because it was a very new team. Like, you got to remember, you've like a couple of 18 and 19-year-olds now in a team.
Starting
Started.
the final.
Yeah, exactly. But you could see there was a fearlessness now amongst this group. And when you can see that, and you could see the intensity rising in our red sessions, you could just see some of the numbers that they were hitting, and you're presenting that to them as well. So you're making them recognize, like, this is where we started off the season. This is what you're able to do now. You know, when you're starting to see 5-6 players running 9 meters per second, like, and you got quick players, and you're starting to see this competitiveness in them in the gym and on the pitch, pushing themselves to lift more, to jump higher, to run faster, demanding more of each other on the pitch from a skill point of view as well. When we just saw that flip in the red sessions, like, okay, this is possible. It's not guaranteed, but it's definitely possible.
Brilliant. Yeah, and again, emphasis on possible, not guaranteed. But there is, I think every team speaks about, like, not a definitive exact moment, but a time where they realise, by God, we have a chance. Whether they get over the line or not, but there's a chance there, and it's all about having a chance. Question 3, the biggest setback or challenge you've had so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
COVID. COVID was tough as an S&C coach, so like I said, it went from, I was, coaching full-time, inter-county level, working as an S&C coach in a private school as well. Like, it just disappeared. And then that coupled with expecting twins, I just kind of segued a little bit for 2 years, kind of went down a route of I even considered completely exiting the industry and pivoting altogether. Temporarily pivoted, and that was a tough phase. It was tough. It was really, well, it was tough coaching personally, but it was really enjoyable from a family point of view because I was at home all the time. So it was tough from that point of view. It happened, for reasons outside of our control, and I think it challenges in ways, and it possibly shape certain things for what I'm doing now. So, but yeah, it was definitely tough. I'm not gonna lie.
Question 4, the flip side then, what's your biggest achievement on and off the pitch?
Off the pitch, my family. Definitely, like, I love my family, and the time we spend together is very precious. And you see with the kids now, like you saw earlier before we started the podcast, with us sitting on my lap, refusing to leave my side until I came home. And you cherish those moments because they're not gonna last. Yeah, my family is definitely, I'm extremely proud of them. And then on the pitch again combined, it has to be 2011 and 2023. I think such a special group to be involved in, both players and management in both teams. And in 2011, it gave me immense confidence that I could explore certain things as a coach. I was as raw a coach as you could have. But Pat and Mickey trusted me and gave me a lot of confidence. And then I felt in 2023, I built up a couple of years of experience, and Mick really brought me in, and Paul had, I suppose, helped with that and had allowed me to, I suppose, really feel as a valued team member to be able to instill something into the team and be part of something really special. So yeah, I'm very grateful to both those managers and coaches for that.
Question 5, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Can I curse?
Go for it.
Chill the fuck out. just chill out. And enjoy the journey. Chill out, enjoy the journey. Stop stop thinking of 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 15-year plan. Just enjoy the journey. I'd love to go back and enjoy everything a little bit more, because I think, um, yeah, I didn't take it all in. Truth be told, and I'd love to go back and, I say that to anyone who asks me for some advice, just enjoy it, take it in. By all means, do ask questions, but just like, genuinely enjoy and immerse yourself and learn while you're there. Don't plan too far ahead.
And it's funny, I don't know how many times it's come up, but I'd say more than half the time, enjoyment has been one of the answers for advice to your 18-year-old self. It's funny the way, it comes up. And even last week, really bad loss, and a good friend of mine and a coach, and he's been on the podcast as well, sent me a picture of him and his 1-year-old son and said, don't take yourself too seriously. And it's exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And it was just, it's not that deep, and I just enjoy it. Who would be your dream dinner guest, Sammy? I don't know why I didn't change it to dinner party. Everyone cheats, so bring as many as you want now, apparently, is the rule.
Oh, I was at a dinner, it was probably 10 years ago now at this stage. It was Liam Hennessy's kind of going away dinner when he finished up with the RFU. And I'd love to be back at that dinner now, to thank everyone that was there for their mentorship, and just chat to them and shoot the breeze now. Like, you would have had, like I said, Liam was at it, Dave Fagan was at it, Jason Cayman, Dan Tobin, Fergal O'Callaghan, Paddy Roach. Like, Paddy, what an absolute legend. Like, he's working over in Arsenal now with the women's team, and myself and Paddy started our journey at the same time in the RFU. He was with Munster and I was with Leinster. Chris Shields, all those guys, like, there was a group of us that started together, and we had some solid mentors around us, and it was a pretty good meal we had then, and I wouldn't mind sitting together with all those guys now and repeating that.
Class. Final question for you: if your life was a book, Sammy, what chapter would this be called?
Enjoyment. Yeah, I'm enjoying life right now. I'm trying not to stress or think past what I'm doing right now, who I'm working with, and just immersing myself and learning from the people around me. I'm trying as genuinely possible to live and coach the way I would advise my 18-year-old self to be.
Class. Brilliant. We'll have to wrap it up there. It's actually now been 3 hours since we sat down, so I better let you go and enjoy your family time.
No
Sammy,
problem.
thanks a million. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.